Okay, good afternoon. I'm Professor Simelai, the professor charged this course for this semester. Okay, I'm sorry. My lecture is in the middle of the semester, so I didn't come every course, every lecture since semester beginning. Okay, but I heard some course you have a very good interaction with the teachers. And I hope today, if I ask you some question, you can give me some response, okay? Yeah, okay. So the topic I will deliver today is the quality and the safety aspects of cereals. I will focus on the corn, wheat, and the rice, because these three cereals are the major production worldwide. And their products is very popular, and you can you can have it in every meal. Okay, so we will just deliver some lecture about the cereals here. Okay. The content, since there are a lot of material needed to deliver to you, so I just give you I summarize the content of today's, and I divided it into 3 parts, okay? First, I will introduce the production and the application of cereals, especially corn, wheat, and the rice, okay? And then, since more and more people care about the body health, so the cereals is very important carbohydrate source for the people every day. So we try to deliver some nutrition effect and health effect from the cereal products. So we promote, or a lot of areas they promoted whole grain ingredients for the food processing, or they try to produce the whole grain food. But I'm not sure everyone know the definition of a whole grain and the whole grain food. Okay, and so I will briefly introduce in the first part of material. And then the second part, since we are talking about the quality and the safety of the cereal and the cereal-related products, so I just used the very famous of everyone knows the products made of wheat, and the wheat flour is the major form of the wheat used for production the wheat-based products. So I will give you some idea how to make wheat flour from the wheat grain. And then during the wheat grain and the wheat flour processing, we will talk about what is the quality of the wheat flour, and how can you determine the quality of the wheat flour with the characters which you can use to making the product specific. And then the final parts, I will give you some idea about the microbial storage during the cereal grown in the field, during the transportation, and during the storage. Even the processing from the cereal-based products, there are some microbial storage or some other quality defect will affect the people's health if you consume too much, or if you consume the bad products, okay? And then we will give you some idea how can we prevent from the microbial storage, especially like the mycotoxin during the processing and during the storage, and what can we need to be aware when we operate this kind of food products, okay? So after the lecture, I hope you can review the lecture's material, just focus on these points, okay? Each point, ask yourself, do I realize or do I understand what they are talking about during this text, okay? So I just mentioned the worldwide production grains in the first three worldwide production grains is corn, wheat, rice, and followed by the barley, sorghum, oats, and the rye. But you can tell from the production amount, you will see the major three cereals are produced much more compared to the others. And some of them are not just used for food making or for the food for human consumption. For example, the corn, they produced a lot of corn, especially the field corn, that's used for the feed for animals, okay? And sometimes they used to make the alcohol, the ethanol, for the replace some of the ethylene, okay? And so, but the major products used for food are wheat, rice, basically. But you will see these three cereals are the most produced worldwide. And since Taiwan, and I believe in some area of the world, just like Taiwan, we cannot produce a lot of cereal for the to meet the consumption demand, okay? Because Taiwan is just a small island, and we don't have a lot of agricultural planted area to produce enough cereals. So most of the cereals produced, except the rice, were imported from the other countries, okay? In Taiwan, the major imported countries of the cereals is from US, okay? And here you will see Taiwan is the number 9 to imported or use the US grains. And for Japan, it's the number 4. And this size figures shows by the quantity. And here is ranked by the value of the cereal, the grain imported from the US. And you will see not so many changes, but the Japan is the number 3, Taiwan is number 7 right here. And that indicated that we spend a lot of money, or we have a lot of trade with the US, okay? And here, just give you some idea, top 20 US wheat export buyer. Just as I mentioned, the first one here is Mexico, okay, by country, okay, it's Mexico, Philippines, Japan, and South Korea, and then Nigeria, Chile, and Taiwan, Indonesia, Thailand. I think you can find where are you from, more or less just has some imported cereals from the US, okay? So Now I just try to give you some idea what we use these cereals. Why we needed to import a lot of cereals from the outside of country. First is about the corn. Another word you will see is the same as the corn is maize. Okay, most of the time maize indicated the field corn. Okay, so you will see what's the field corn, not the vegetable corn. Okay, vegetable corn is fresh, but the field corn usually are dried in the field and harvested when they are dried and keep in dried and stored for a longer time. Here is the global corn production by country. So you will see why we imported a lot of the cereal from US, because US produced a lot of corn. And then is China. But in China, they produced a lot of the cereals by the ranking. But since they have a lot of population, large population, so they may not have enough domestic produced cereal for themselves. So they still needed to import it from other areas, other countries. And the trade value or trade money is sometimes depending on China. If they needed purchase a lot of cereal from overseas, then the value of the cereal of this year will increase a lot because of the competition. Okay, and here you will see another one is Brazil, and then it's the South Africa or South America. Okay. And here, just give you some idea. The corn, I said we imported from the US, majorly field corn. Okay, this is the field corn. And the vegetable corn, most of the time is a sweet corn or west corn. Let's just, when they are still have a lot of moisture or water inside the kernels. But for this field corn, is okay, you will see this one. Basically, this is the dank corn. We said that this has after they dried, they will dent in the center. Okay, this dank corn usually used for starch washing. Okay, isolated starch from this corn. Okay, and most of the time this corn can used for the feed. And some of them can be used for the food ingredients. For example, in Mexico, they used a lot of field corn to make their traditional product, like traditional meal, like a tortilla or frijita, something like that. And now they have a more specialty corn. Okay, this specialty corn is very. Now they have like purple corn, whole corn curd, corn and the kernel are deep purple. That's because they have a lot of anthocyanin inside the pigment. And this kind of specialty corn are just used for food made for. They will claim they made this specialty corn with the high antioxidant, okay? And here is imported value of corn worldwide, okay? China is the first one, Mexico, Japan. And here you will see this, most of this corn imported by these countries are used for animal feed, like for pig, for poultry, okay, animal feed. And the application of the corn, you will see they can use in many fields for food or non-food, okay. For example, for food application here, the most famous one is corn syrup. They made from the corn starch, and then hydrolysis to degrade the starch into the glucose or some oligosaccharide, and then they use isomerization to convert the glucose into the fructose. So this is the commercial fructose syrup made from the cornstarch. And some of them are used for the starch itself, but sometimes they made the modified starch to change or to modify the properties of starch during the processing. For example, they can stand for the high shearing, high temperature, high pH, or something like that, okay? And they can use for medicine, okay? Pharmaceutical products, or some use this, like for example, the fever syrup, okay? And sometimes they used a lot of in industry. For example, the textile, they needed starch to make the textile have the specific shape, and they made it for the paper, okay? And sometimes they just made it for the utility or something like a paint. Some of pen, they also made it from the modified starch, or they can pyrolyze, okay? Heat starch at a high temperature with alkaline or acid catalyte, and to degrade or to pyrose, and they make the glue to stick the papers, okay? So you will see corn have a lot of application, not just for food. And here, just some more clear, not a lot of figures, and it will be easier for you to take a look, okay? Here, I like to introduce a cereal kernel, okay? We said that this is a cereal kernel, okay? Most of the cereal, they have the appearance or the morphology just like the kernel grain. And in each kernel, they have 3 parts. First, we call this endosperm, okay? That's the major part of the kernel. Most of the time, they have about the 70% above of the weight percentage for each kernel. And then the second part is the germ. Okay, for example, the corn, they have a large germ. Okay, and then the third part is the brain. Okay, the outside of the outside layer, or maybe multiple layers of the grain, is we call it the brain. Okay, so endosperm composed of the starch and some storage protein. Okay, and then this starch or protein, you can isolate the starch from the corn kernel, and the starch can used for industrial starch application. Like are not asked for very pure or very pure quality, but for the food, we will say you cannot have you need to keep their purity is high, okay? And then they can just degrade, hydrolyze, and to make the dextrin. For this dextrin, they may, if you just dry heat hydrolysis, then we call it the pyrodextrin, and they sometimes used for glue. That's a very good glue for the paper or the paper bag, because paper can be recycled. If you use the glue from the chemical or some pure, some from the chemicals products, then they are not easy to be recycled or biodegradable. But if your glue made from the starch, then it's environmental friendly and it's biodegradable. So let's find a lot of starch used for the glue and for the textile and for paper manufacturing, okay? And here is just I mentioned for the corn syrup, okay? And they make some syrup or some glucose syrup, okay? And here is some just starch used to making the jelly or some dessert or some bakery products. And the germ, since corn's kernel has a large germ, they contain a lot of oil. So you will heard the corn salad oil. That's because during the starch isolation from the corn, you can separate the pure germ and send it to the oil company to press or to extract the corn oil. And so you will get the oil. And the rest of the bran here, most of the time, is the dead cell wall cell. So they have they composed of the cellulose, some fiber, dietary fiber, and sometimes they also have some starch sticky on the surface of the bran. So they will use for the feed, okay? Not just for cattle in Taiwan. Sometimes we use for chicken, for pig, okay? Okay, the second cereal is the wheat, okay? And most of the wheat products are made of the wheat flour. So the first thing you need to mill wheat kernel into the wheat flour, okay? But before that, we will talk about the wheat production by country. As the same, you will see China is the first one, okay? Then it's come from the, followed by the India and Russia or some United States, maybe the first or fifth, okay, here. But as I mentioned, most of the time China, the wheat they produce may not enough for themselves, okay? So they still need to purchase from our other countries. Here, the top 10 wheat producing countries, just you can see the US is number 4, and Canada is number 6, Australia is number 9. Why I circled mark these 3 countries? Because in Taiwan, the wheat we imported are most from these 3 countries. About 80 to 85% of the wheat were imported from US. The rest of them are from the Canada and Australia. And in addition, we may imported some wheat flour, the milled wheat flour from European country or from some Australia. Okay. And here just give you some idea what's the top 10 wheat exporting countries, okay? And here we will see the importing country from the world is the Japan is here. You can see the Japan here, but actually Taiwan maybe, I remember it's about 11 or 12, something around there. Okay, but I said that most of the time we not use the wheat kernel for food making, except for soy sauce making. We may use the wheat kernel or some wine making, we will use the wheat kernel. Most of the time, we use the wheat flour. So we will see the wheat flour production here. Most of the wheat flour are used for bakery and confectionery. Okay, and some of them will use for noodles and pasta. Rest of them will use the feed industry. Okay, and some will use others. Okay, this is the global wheat flour market. But in Taiwan, the wheat flour we used, about 50% wheat flour are used for Chinese wheat flour process. What is the Chinese wheat flour products? Like the noodle, okay, any kind of noodle, and some steamed bread, steamed bun, dumpling, okay. So this is the Chinese wheat flour. And this Chinese wheat flour processed products, okay? And most of these products need the medium gluten strength of flour, okay? And then the 35% of flour milled in local were used for bakery products. Bakery products, basically, we made for the bread, cookie, and the cake. Okay. Since Taiwan, we are not used bread as our major meal. We still can eat the rice, or we use the noodle or steamed bread as our major meal. Okay, so that's why we have we used about half of the wheat flour for making this kind of products. And some other wheat processed food is about 15% used for gluten foods or agricultural feed, because gluten has the sticky properties. They can stick some nutrient components together, and when you drop into the pond or lake, they will not disperse or disrupt quickly. Okay, I don't know. Do you have a chance to eat gluten food, or we said plant-based meat in Taiwan? Have you tried that before? Okay, you have that, okay? So the picture I show here, have you any idea? This one is the gluten, we make the wheat dough, okay? Wheat flour dough, and then we wash out the starch, and you will keep the gluten stick together with the elasticity and the viscous properties. Also, they have a springiness texture, and we deep fry them to make they will become a big empty inside the ball or bubble or balloon, something like that. Then we, because there is no any flavor, so we soak inside into the soy sauce or some spicing, and with the, for example here, with some peanuts, okay, and make the canned food, okay. We call it the 面筋 gluten, okay. And this one, have anyone tried this before, or have any chance to test this? No? Okay. If you go to the cafeteria, maybe you will see something like this, okay? This one has some texture when you chew it. It's like not so spongy, but it has some texture. We call it 米梯面轮. Okay, just something like that. Okay, this one, if you go to the cafeteria, you will find something like this. They will saute with some vegetable or some soy sauce. Okay, and since this gluten is washed from the or collected from the wheat flour dough, so their major their composition is protein. Okay, the major component is protein. So we call it, and they have the texture like meat, have chewy texture. So we call it plant-based meat. Okay, this is very traditional Chinese wheat products made from the wheat flour. Okay, so basically it's 15% here. But since this survey is maybe 10 years ago, so now I believe it increased a little bit. Okay, because we have increased market about the plant-based meat industry. Okay, then I will talk about the rice. Okay, basically rice is our major production cereal or production crop. Okay, and you will see. Okay, China is still the number one, and the Indian. Then Japan is the it's 10, number 10, I think. Okay, but here you will see most of the rice produced country is in Asia. Okay, and a lot of the Asia use the rice as their major or main carbohydrate source for their daily intake. And here is top 10 rice exporting countries. Okay, you will see. Okay, India is the first number one country export their rice. Okay, in Taiwan you may purchase some Indian rice in the supermarket, but a lot of people in Taiwan, they prefer if you will spend more money to pay to buy the rice, they will try to get the rice from Thailand or Japan. Okay, not from the India. Okay, and so here is the top 10 rice export country. And here just give you some idea. If you have a chance to travel around the Taiwan island, you will see we have a lot of area have the rice crop. Okay, and basically the major area is around Yunjianan. We call it this area. It's about 60% of rice produced in this area. And a lot of people, they prefer the rice produced from the eastern side of the island. Okay, it's about 13% of the rice produced in eastern area. They believe this area, since there is no heavy duty or industry around this area, so they think the environmental is more cleaner and the water is more clean. So the rice produced maybe contain the higher quality of the rice here. Actually, the planting area, rice is the major cultivating plant in Taiwan. We have 270,000 hectares are planting the rice, and the year production is about 1.56 million metric tons. But unfortunately, from this curve, you will see the rice production is increased due to the agriculture technique increased a lot. And but we consume the rice is decreased significantly. For example, here, 1976, every year they consume about 128 kilogram, but a couple years ago, it's 44. It's only 1/3. Okay, I believe now it's still low, or maybe lower than this number. Okay, and this is another country's data shows Japan has the same trend as in Taiwan, and South Korea is sound much better. Okay, they still have a higher consumption of rice. This is because, okay, a lot of Western type food, for example, made from the wheat, the food product made off of wheat, consumption increased, okay? And so you cannot eat too much, especially these cereals contain a lot of carbohydrate, starch. They think they will make you fatty, okay? But actually, this is not true, okay? I will not talk about too much about this because this is not the topic of today. But actually, we think the cereal is a good source for food for the daily intake for human health keeping. Okay, so now you have some idea about the cereals and the first three major worldwide produced cereals already. But now we just say, okay, how can we increase the people or increase the consumption of the cereals? We still have the health benefit from the cereal. So here is some idea about the whole grain and the whole grain foods. Have you heard this before? Whole grain, okay? And whole grain food. Have you seen some food products in the supermarket shelf, in the shelf of a supermarket? They have the label about the whole grain or whole grain food. Okay, where did you find it?
Family Mart.
Where?
Family Mart.
Family Mart. In Taiwan?
Yes.
They have the label about the whole grain?
Actually, I didn't specifically look at the label, but I think that is whole grain because the bread contains several brand of the wheat.
Okay, so you can see some brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think it's a whole grain
Yes.
food, okay?
Yes, for sure.
Any people would like to share with us about the whole grain? What do you know? What's the whole grain?
I think last time I saw whole grain food in Chenjia.
Chenjia?
Oh.
So they say something on the label.
PX Smart 是什么？全联。
全联。
对。
Okay, no problem. But do they have some label or specific claim to say, okay, this product is a whole grain or they contain the whole grain?
I think so. It's like mostly whole grain, like.
What kind of product have you seen?
Like Quaker oats.
Oh, okay, cracker. Okay. Anyone like to share?
I saw just like a
Meal?
Yeah, but I cannot read Zhongwen, so I think the sign or the symbol look like the human or the queen convert or something like that.
You mean the green? There is the green man figure logo.
Yeah,
Okay, that's health food, not the whole grain. Okay, we call it the 健康食品. Another label for that. Have you seen any kind of the labeling or claim on their package tell you this is a whole grain or whole grain food in your country? Yes? Okay. Okay. Where are you from? Indonesia. Okay, so you have the label on your package say this is a whole grain. Okay, good. All right, so should we take a break or we can continue? Break? Okay, so we can have about 10 minutes? 10 past 3, okay? Can we come back to the lecture? Okay, I think some people, they already know what's the whole grain, and they realize there are some products has a whole grain labeling on the front of pack. But here, I still like to convince you why you need to take grain, and especially you need to take whole grain as the you just every day. Okay. So we will talk about the health benefits of whole grains. Okay, first. Here is the huge table, okay? But somehow you can just take a look. The whole grain wheat flour and refined grain wheat flour, WG and RG. You just take a look at these two rows. And you just look at the dietary fiber value here. Okay, here you will see like wheat flour and the rice. Just see these two cereals, okay? You will see the major difference between these are the dietary fiber. So when we take the, have some scientific experiment or evidence show, if you take the whole grain, you have a lot of health benefit. So first, originally we think, okay, maybe the contribution from the dietary fiber, because dietary fiber have been evidenced that really has some good to health. And here is just the same similar table, but this one in Chinese, I'm sorry, but this is dietary fiber, and here is the rice, very popular or very famous rice variety in Taiwan, and we call it Taigeng 9号. If you try to purchase the rice and cook rice at home, you can try to look at these varieties of rice, okay, in supermarket, because they taste much better even after they cool down, okay, they still taste good. And here is the brown rice, that means the whole grain. And here is the germ rice. We take off the bran, but keep the germ. And here is refined, polished rice, okay, just white rice. And you will see, okay, the definite reduce the dietary fiber from the brown rice to germ rice to refined rice, okay? It's the same for another famous or popular rice variety. It's long grain rice. This is short grain rice, and this is long grain rice, okay? And here is the black rice and the red rice, okay? You will see the black rice and the red rice, they have the high values of dietary fiber, but we don't have the, okay, polish them into the white rice, because everyone try to consume the black rice and the red rice. That's because they are red or they are black. Okay, the black or red, it's because the pigments on the in the bran. Okay, the pigment in bran. So if I polish this colored rice, if I polish the color rice, remove the bran, you can get the white endosperm. It's nonsense, okay? So when you consume the black rice or red rice, you will eat the whole grain with the bran, okay? So from these two tables may give you some idea, okay, dietary fiber is really important for yourself, okay, for everyone. Have any idea how many grams of dietary fiber needed to be consumed or tag every day, everyone? Have any idea? 20? Okay. Anyone else? 30? 30, okay. Actually, in Taiwan, okay, a lot of countries or area, they recommend to take the dietary fiber between 20 to 45. In Taiwan, we ask people try to get the dietary fiber daily 25 grams, okay? But do you think you take enough dietary fiber? No? Okay, yeah, I believe most of the people, you don't take enough dietary fiber. I just give you some idea, okay? If you want to take dietary fiber from onion, okay, the onion, okay, you need to take about 30 kilograms of onion for 25 dietary fiber. Okay, it's impossible, right? Another idea is if you want to take dietary fiber from fruit, for example, the medium size of apple. Each medium size apple with skin, not the take off the skin, okay, with skin, you have about 2.5 gram dietary fiber. So if you want to take dietary fiber for 25 grams just from the apple, you need to take 10 medium-sized apple with skin. It's also either impossible. Okay, so how can we get enough dietary fiber? One reasonable solution is take the cereals with bread, because you will eat rice, you will eat wheat, okay? All right, but I believe not so many people eat the brown rice for their daily meal. Is anyone eat, you will purchase or eat brown rice on purpose? Okay, every meal? Okay, good. Keep it. All right. All right. So here we just talk about the dietary fiber health benefits. You will see a lot of these benefits have been evidenced, scientific evidenced. Okay. But this based on you need to take enough dietary fiber and daily take enough dietary fiber. Okay. For example, lower GI. Do you know what's the GI? Glycemic index, okay. And the lower cholesterol level, okay. And preventing the colon cancer. All of these have been evidenced, okay, by scientific experiment, okay. But recently, there are some papers they issued this, okay. They try to get a lot of data and from the published paper and report, they find out that all-cause mortality dose responsibility relationship from the dietary fiber. If you take 25 dietary fiber per day, you can reduce the 15% of the mortality, all-cause mortality, reduced about 15%. This use two models here, just two mathematical models to fit. Okay, so this relationship exists, especially you take the 25 gram fiber. But somehow, if you take the whole grain daily, about 35 to 50 gram whole grain daily, or whole meat, whole wheat, okay? They can have the similar reduction of the mortality, all-cause mortality. Okay, but in this case, if you take a 35 to 50 gram whole wheat, since the whole wheat has the major components is starch, then followed by the protein, and then trace mineral or something else. They also have dietary fiber, but their dietary fiber only 4 to 6 gram fiber. But they have a similar reduction of the risk. Another is they look at the type 2 diabetes. It's the similar trend here. If you take 25 gram fiber daily, you can have a 20% risk reduction for type 2 diabetes. If you take a 35 gram whole grain, okay, has the same reduction. In 35 gram whole wheat, they only have a 4 gram fiber. Okay, it's just small amount, about 16% of the dietary fiber. Another case is cardiovascular disease. The same thing, if you take a 50 gram whole wheat flour, they have the same reduction, but they only has 6 gram fiber. So all this evidence tell you something behind, okay? Nutrition profile system should include the whole grain, not only the percent fiber, dietary fiber of whole grain products. So you don't need to spend a lot of money to purchase a lot of apple or a lot of onion, okay? But you just need, in your 3 meals, have a whole grain, all right? So what do we have the whole grain between the difference component between the whole grain and the refined grain? What do we remove from the whole grain to become the refined grain? We remove the bran. We remove the germ. We just keep the endosperm. Okay? So we just look at what do we have in the wheat bran first, okay? Because germ is so tiny, except the corn germ. Most of cereal grain has very tiny germ, but they have a lot of wheat bran, maybe 14 to 20% of the weight is bran, okay? So what do we have in the wheat bran? I just mentioned the cereal grain is several layers of the dead cell, okay? The most of, we said that the protoplast is dry out. Only left is the cell wall. Cell wall has a lot of dietary fiber. The dietary fiber, I said, okay, 6 gram dietary fiber from 55 gram of the whole grain. That's from the bran. Okay, major area for the dietary fiber is from the cereal bran. Okay, between the cereal, inside of the cereal bran, between the dietary fiber, there are a lot of phenolic acid or polyphenolic. Okay, those are the compounds. Now we realize they are good for health because they have high antioxidant ability and some immune regulation or some all of kind of good effect for human being. Okay, so you will see in wheat, for example, in wheat bran, they have a phenolic acid play as the antioxidant, and they have some polyphenol even, and they have a mineral and some vitamins in bran. But in refined grain, you didn't have it all, have this, okay, because you removed of the bran. And for example, for the colored or pigmented rice, I just mentioned the black rice, the red rice. Here, the bottom is the brown rice, just regular common rice, but just take the hull and keep the whole grain. Okay, this also has some phenolic acid, phytic acid, vitamin B, and the tocopherol in the germ, and the phytosterol, gamma oryzanol. All of these are good for human being. And for the colored rice, they contain this, but they also have the pigments. For example, for the black rice, they have anthocyanin. This is a water-soluble pigment. So when you wash, before cooking, you wash the rice, the purple rice or black rice, you will see the wash water become purple or have some dark color. That's because this the pigments on the surface or in the bran is water soluble. So when you wash them, they will leach out. But for red rice, they have the pigment is proanthocyanin. This proanthocyanin is a large or polymer, okay? They are water insoluble. They are water insoluble. So if you have the red rice, when you wash them before cooking, you will not see any changes in your the color of the wash water. Okay, so here is give you some idea what's the whole grain, especially in the bran, the components of the in bran, and they are good for the health. Here give you some the idea. This is the chemical compounds, their function, okay? So you will see phytate, phenolic acid, some alkyl-inositol. This is this is the one kind of a phenolic acid or polyphenol, and the lignin, some tocopherol, vitamin E, and some minerals. All of these eat together, or you have them together, then they have a synergistic effect. They are good for your health. Okay. So here is the summary of the whole grain products against the major chronic disease. If you take the whole grain, you will increase the dietary fiber intake. And besides, you will consume the bioactive components as well. Then, if you take the dietary fiber, your food belong to the low GI, okay? And you will feel satiety. You will not feel hungry so quickly. So you will not eat often and eat too much. Then you will the obesity risk will decrease. And if it's the lower GI food, the insulin sensitivity will increase. So you will reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. In the same time, if you have a dietary fiber, they cannot be digested by your intestine enzymes. So they will not be hydrolyzed and cannot be absorbed as the regular digestion system. But they will go through the large intestine or large colon, okay? The colon, so there is some microorganism, they will ferment the dietary fiber because they use dietary fiber as their carbon source. Then they will produce the acid. This acid will help for the reduce the pH around the colon area. So some bad microorganisms will not grow, will be inhibited. And some probiotic, the good microorganism will grow and help for your gut microbiota, okay? And if you have some bioactive compounds and some minerals, especially magnesium, then you will have some homocysteine. Let's decrease the homocysteine. That will cause inflammation of your body, so you will reduce the inflammation. And then you will reduce the cardiovascular disease. And if bioactive compound, or most of them are antioxidant or inflammatory, status will become better. And then the tumor cell growth will reduce. So the cancer risk will reduce. So all this just tell you why you need to take the whole grain instead of the refined grain for your meal, okay? So the trend of the cereal grain products from the marketing survey, they said that the major products will be produced or demanded by the consumer is a whole grain with high fiber food. So if you are the people or you are the company, food company, that's the target you need to approach. Okay, try produce the whole grain products with the tasty and the attractive. And allow the people to are willing to purchase this kind of products. So in their case, general recognition is what is the whole grain and high fiber. That's the products need to contain above 55% whole grain, okay, on dry base, or contain 10 to 15% of dietary fiber in their products, okay. So this is just the major trend. So I think you already have know, or you have some idea what's the whole grain and the whole grain foods. Here is some structures of the cereals. As I mentioned, most of the cereal is the morphology is a grain. The grain contains three major parts. First is the major part is endosperm inside the kernel, composed of a lot of starch and the storage protein. Then it's the germ. It's very tiny, except the corn grain. And then the outside is the bran, several multiple layers of the dead cell. And here, the only difference here is the rice. The rice we harvest usually with the husk. This is inedible parts, okay? Nobody want to eat the husk, okay? It cannot be eat. So if you take out the husk or the husk, the rice still have the three parts of the like wheat, germ, endosperm, and the bran, even the corn, okay? So you will see the whole grain, that means the edible parts of a grain, of cereal. So recently, I think this definition is just come from the whole grain initiative in Europe, okay? Basically, they combined a lot of definition from the US and other countries, and they come out this definition for whole grain. The key statement of the whole grain definition is the whole grain should consist of intact, ground, cracked, flaked, or otherwise processed kernel after removal of the inedible parts, such as hull or husk. Okay? And the endosperm, germ, and the bran should must be present in the same relative proportions. That means, for example, we said the wheat have about 85% endosperm, and about 14% of the 14% of the bran, and about 1 or 2% of germ. They should keep the same relative proportions, not just a little bit bran you can tell from the outside or from the surface. Okay, so they should keep the same relative proportion, no matter it's ground into flour or crack or do some kind of any form of the ingredients. And further statements, that's the grains included the true cereals. The true cereals, just the cereal I mentioned or I introduced from the grains, okay? But some other pseudo cereals are included because like amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, they are look like the cereals. They show us the grain or kernel, and most of the time they use the flour or use the same made the food as the same way of the cereal grain. Okay, like a buckwheat noodle, we call it the soba in Japan. Okay, they make from the buckwheat flour. So you need to mill the buckwheat into flour, then to make to the noodle. Okay. Another thing is the process allowed. Now we know the cereal is a live seed. That means they can germinate. They can, after germination, they can become the new plant and have the new seed for next generation. So we know that if we can use the cereal to make the germination, and they will change their physiological properties, and they can produce the primary metabolites. They may be good for human being also. So you can make the whole grain, if you use the whole grain to make the fermentation, small degree of the fermentation, or malting, or even the sprouting, you can still call it the whole grain. But there is some limitation about the sprouting, okay? The sprouting, you can germinate, you can see the germ, but not longer than your grain, okay? Not longer your grain. So, for example, the wheat grass, it's not the sprouting one, okay? Not the sprout, okay? It's not allowed. And for the recombination, it's also allowed because, for example, we use the wheat flour, about 50% of wheat flour to make Chinese wheat products. But somehow we just imported the hard wheat to make the high strength, gluten strength flour for bread making. And we imported another varieties of wheat, softer wheat, to make the low gluten strength of the flour to make a cake or cookie. But we needed the medium strength, gluten strength of flour. So we needed to combine the flour made from the hard wheat and the soft wheat together to make the medium strength flour. So this is allowed, but you still need to keep in mind that the endosperm brain germ should have the same relative proportion as in the intact kernel. Okay. All right. So we know the whole grain ingredient. It's much easier to understand and it's much clear. But for the whole grain food, a lot of countries has their own definition, and it's very difficult to get the same. But somehow we in Taiwan we accept this definition for the whole grain food. Okay, because most of consumers they may not purchase the grain ingredients to make their own food, but they will purchase the whole grain food from the market. So they need to recognize what's the whole grain food. And here we defined the whole grain food is the whole grain food should contain at least 50% above, okay, whole grain ingredients. So what's the whole grain ingredients? Just as we mentioned earlier for the whole grain, okay? And based on the dry weight. Another is if you cannot make the more than 50% whole grain ingredients to make products, and some people they will complain the whole grain products made with a lot of whole grain, it's not tasty. It's hard to swallow, or it's just after taste it's bitter or something. There were a lot of complain about the whole grain products if you used a lot of whole grain ingredients made of. Okay, so we said that the whole grain you can have label just whole grain, not the whole grain products or whole grain foods. That means you need to have a minimum 25 whole grain ingredients to make these products. And you still can have label or have some claim on the package to say, okay, these products contain whole grains. But you cannot say it's a whole grain food. It's different. Okay, can you tell? Yes, please. Okay, let me, for example, when you make a whole wheat bread, okay? No, it's not necessary, okay? Because we said, okay, for example, I give you a very simple recipe or formula to make a bread, okay? For example, we used 100 gram flour and we whole wheat flour. Or we can just use about 75 gram flour, whole wheat flour, and have another 25% is all-purpose flour or some white flour, okay? And then we just have a very simple formula. We have add about 70% water and 1% salt and 2.5% yeast, for example, okay? So if you just write down what I mentioned, the formulation, 75 gram whole wheat flour, 25 gram white flour, and then 1 gram salt, and maybe, okay, 1.5 yeast. Then you can make the bread. Okay, that's the basic four ingredients for bread making. And then you need to add water to make a dough. So usually we will make dough, we will add about 70 gram water to make a dough, wheat flour dough. In this case, for dry weight, so we didn't count any water inside. So you have 75 gram flour, then divide, okay. Oh, all right. I think I can write down here and try to calculate for you. Okay, so you have a 75 gram whole wheat flour. Then you have 100 gram total flour, right? Plus 1 gram salt, 1.5 yeast. Okay, that's all you have. So if you divided 75 divided by 102.5, what do you have from here? Is anyone can calculate it for me? 75 whole wheat flour and 100 gram flour plus 1 gram salt and 1.5 yeast. So you have 75 divided by 1 to 1 point. So can you anyone get the percentage here for me?
3.
Okay, 73%, okay? All right, so it's above 50%, right? Can you get it?
Okay, Professor, thank you.
Okay, so it's not necessary to 100 gram whole grain in wheat, okay, whole flour wheat. But you just try to make this. If some people, they think, okay, whole wheat flour, whole wheat bread made from whole wheat flour, it may not tasty. So they can try to reduce the whole wheat flour, but they still need to meet this should be above 50 or 51, depends, different. But this small difference is okay. So, can you understand? Okay.
Yes, Professor. Thank you very
All right.
much.
So in this case, we have two. We said it's a steps definition. If you try to have enough or have more whole grain, you can make the products have whole grain products. But if you just have try to increase the consume, and you still cannot, you can consume the wheat products, wheat grain products gradually, okay, not just one step to have the 100 gram. In this case, a lot of people, they will say, it's not tasty, it's awful, then they just reject any whole grain products, okay. All right, so here is the, if you travel around, you may see some of these label on the food packages, especially in US. I know there are some product, basically this stem is, I think they said it's about almost 2,000 products have this label around the 65 countries, okay. So this is just 3 labels like issued by the whole grain counselor, okay. They have 100% whole grain and 50 plus regular whole grain labeling. And in Canada, they have a little bit difference, especially 100% and 50% stamped. This is the, for example, 50% stem plus stem, it's at least half of the product by weight is whole grain. But here is the at least 50% of the grain is whole grain. Can you tell the difference between these two? This one is 50% of grain. For example, if you have the grain products, have wheat, have oat, have rye, have rice, something, all of these are whole grain, are grain product, grain ingredients, okay? So they just count for the grain products. You have a whole grain in these products, about amount is 50% enough, above 50%. For example, I use the brown rice, but I use the refined white flour. Okay, they are all grain ingredients, but you just need to keep 50% plus grain ingredients are whole grain. But here it's different. Here is just the whole products. They may have a grain, may have some ingredients not the grain, not belong to grain. For example, I have sugar, I have some fruits or dry fruit. They all count into the dry weight of the products. But in this case, they needed 50% plus of the whole grain in the dry products. Okay? So it's different. So here is some example for the stamp. So next time, you can try to find some stamps in the shelf. I'm sure we don't have this in local supermarket, except that you go to the some market that imported the food products, like Jones, Jason or some supermarket. I don't know if you have a chance to go there or not. Jason, they imported a lot of food from the US or from the Europe. So you may find some products have this kind of label, okay? Here is the label issued by the Taiwan Grain Industry Association. That's because I'm the president right now for this association. So we try to promote, we issued this, design this, the label for whole grain ingredients, whole grain food, and with whole grain, just with whole grain food, and with some definition here. This whole grain ingredient needed to 100% whole grain ingredient, and the whole grain food need about 51% of the whole grain in dry weight, and with whole grain products need to have the 25% whole grain ingredient in dry weight. Okay, and can you tell the little bit difference between these three labels? I just do some kind of survey. Okay, can you tell the difference between these three? And the relationship between the between this logo and the definition? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we try to let the consumer can easily tell the difference between the logo. Okay, and we will accept the food company to apply for this logo soon, and hope next year you will see some in the shelf, okay, in market. Okay. I think then we will talk about the quality. For here, I just give you some example for wheat flour. Okay. I cannot tell you any cereal grain quality, but I just give you the some example for the flour quality. Before talking about the flour quality, I need to talk about the wheat flour milling. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with the flour milling? Wheat flour milling, especially wheat flour milling. Is anyone learned this before?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, so if you are not, I give you some video. You can take a look. If you are already know the wheat flour milling, I just give you some briefly summary. If I did some incorrect information, please correct me, okay? And for here, I just give you some idea. Okay, wheat flour milling we made from wheat, but we call this process is a dry milling process. Okay, for dry milling process, milling we just try to make them smaller particle, flour particle. But before we dry them, we cannot use a lot of water to wash them, to clean them. We use the dry way to get rid of the dirt and some insect, some broken kernel or some other kernel or foreign material, okay? All of these process are in dry way, okay? We didn't add water to wash them, be sure this. So I'm not sure you feel comfortable or not, okay? Because if you harvest the dry grain kernel from the field, you will see a lot of stuff on more than wheat kernels are harvested together or collected together. So before milling them, mill them, or before the grind them, you need to get rid of or clean the rest of the material except the wheat. You need to try to clean them. So the clean procedure in wheat flour milling is a very important facility, or it's very important step to keep your flour safety and quality. Okay, so this is very important. So here, the cleaning process for the dry milling is very important. You need to use a lot of facility to remove impurity and obtain the cleaned, whole, pure wheat kernel or sound kernel, okay, for the milling. Even though we said we didn't add water to wash them, to keep them clean, but we used the mechanical way to keep remove the impurity. We in only one step in wheat flour milling, we have some water added in. That's during this the tempering, or called the condition process. Okay, because the wheat is you harvest from the field is dry, and usually we hope they can keep in the safety moisture content for the storage. So the water content or moisture content for the grain safety storage is about needed to below 12.5% of moisture content. And the 12.5% moisture content will allow your grain dry and keep longer. But when you try to crush them and mill them into the small particle, it's very difficult. Okay, it's too hard to grind. So we need a tempering. In this step for tempering, we may add the water to up to about like 12.5 to 18% of water moisture content of the grain after the tempering. That's the purpose to toughening the bran and the softening endosperm. When you have some water added into the dry kernel, the outside of bran, they absorb the water quickly. They will become tough. So when you broken them, they will become the large piece. And the inside of the endosperm, during the tempering, the water will diffuse into the inside of the endosperm, will make them softer. Okay, and then after you grinding them, they will easier to be ground. Not the you don't need to add a lot of force to broken the starch to make a damaged starch. It's not the one we want. Okay, so we will have some tempering or conditioning here. Okay, that's the only step that we will add a little bit of water into the dry kernel for the to keep up to get the better flour quality. Then if, for example, in Taiwan, we didn't have the medium strength of the wheat. So we only have a hard and the soft wheat. And if we try to get the medium strength wheat, we may need a blending wheat here before milling. So you can do it. Basically, in Taiwan, we try to mill the hard wheat and the soft wheat separately. After the milling, we will blending flour, because during the milling, if the texture of the wheat, for example, it's a hard wheat, we need a long processing step, and we need to temper them with more water. And so it's different from the soft wheat milling parameters. So if you can separate, milling them separately, then you can get a better flour from each type of wheat. And then you can blend them later after. So after this, we will just, you got the clean kernel and the pure wheat kernel, then you have an optimum tempering procedure, get the better moisture content and the better hardness of the wheat. Then you just go to the roller mill to broken them and reduce the size of the flour particles. Okay, so this is the wheat flour milling. So from the safety and the sanity and the quality view, you need to be aware, you need to have a very clean procedure to get the rid of the impurity and get a clean sound wheat kernel. Okay, and for better flour quality, to reduce the amount of the damage of starch, or you get the homogeneity of flour particle distribution, then you have needed to do the tempering or conditioning. Okay, so that's the flour milling. Okay, here just give you some idea. The wheat cleaning before flour milling, you will see a lot of mechanical facility used to get rid of impurity. Okay, and I will not go through to detail. And if you are interested, you can see the video I provided in the PowerPoint later. And here is just one machine, give you an example. Okay, here is the wheat. Okay, you get from the silo or from the field, and you will see a lot of impurity inside, different type of grain or even the stone, and sometimes we also find some metals inside. Okay, and after go through this machine, then you can get the accepted the wheat clean kernel, and here is rejected kernel, foreign material or some shrunk wheat kernel or something. So you will get something like this. So this is the one we want. If you cannot get this clean, pure, sound wheat kernel after they're broken, you cannot separate them anymore. Okay. So this is very important. And after you get the clean wheat kernel, you just broken them, okay? Broken them, first step that we said it's the broken, just open the kernel and get the, expose the endosperm, and then they will separate or collect different flour from the different parts of kernel. For example, inside the kernel or outside the kernel to get different flours, okay? Because the flour from different area of kernel has different composition, and they will show different qualities, okay? So here is just some flour milling diagram. It's not so just simple as I mentioned, okay, broken them, reducing the size, not at all, okay? It's very complex. And if you are interested, you can see this video. It takes about 18 minutes. But if you have no idea about the flour milling, I will suggest you take a look. Okay, then you have some idea. And here is another 2 videos, okay? Just they will tell you. For this one, they just give you each step, as I mentioned, why you need to tempering, why they, how can they clean the wheat, use the mechanical facilities. So I think this one you can take a look by yourself. And the final product, okay, basically in the modern flour milling, you can get the white flour, okay? That's the major products we have right now, okay? But somehow they will have some brown flour. Brown flour, it's not really wholemeal flour, whole grain flour. They just have some flour, white flour, mixed with some bran. They don't have the same proportion as the intact flour, okay, an intact kernel. So here maybe some bread, you see, okay, they have some spot or some brown bran on the surface. They are made from the brown flour, not the whole grain. But the wholemeal flour or whole wheat flour, that means we just have the whole grain and milled into the flour and collect everything, okay, with the same proportion as the intact kernel has the endosperm, germ, and the bran, okay. So here is the wheat flour milling. I think just give you some idea whole wheat flour milling. Actually, the ancient milling flour or use the stone milling. Most of the time you can get the whole grain flour, whole wheat flour, because you cannot separate them after grinding, okay. Here just give you some idea, okay, what you get from the wheat kernel after milling. Here, if you get the flour from the inside of kernel here, we said it's pattern flour, okay? If you get the whole thing except the bran and the germ, the whole endosperm, it's straight grade flour. After you take the flour from the center, the rest of the outside area of the endosperm, this flour we call the clear flour or dark flour. And here is the whole grain flour or whole wheat flour in Europe market. They just take, they get rid of part of the germ and the bran and some aluminum layer here. That's because if I mix the whole everything together, you will know the germ contains a lot of oil. And the area of the allelon layer, okay, the outside layer here, they have the enzymes. They will hydrolyze the lipid in germ. So the whole wheat flour like this one cannot store longer. Okay, they will rancid quickly. So in Europe, most of the time, they will get the flour without the germ included. That's for the flour making and with the longer shelf life. And here, if you get, we get the some wheat flour, that means the this area, okay, with a lot of protein and the outside of the area of endosperm, so they are rich in vitamin and the mineral. They still are nutritious, so they use the for wheat flour, okay. All right, then I will talk about the quality evaluation of wheat and wheat flour after the break, okay? 10 minutes. Okay, I think we will go to the wheat flour quality evaluation, okay? As we know, the wheat flour can be used to make a lot of products, okay? But it's depending on the flour quality and the final product's requirement. Basically, you can divide it into the the gluten needed or not, okay? And so here you will see the gluten is one kind of protein, so it's depending on the content of protein. If a higher protein, if you need a gluten, basically you need to have a higher protein wheat. And here just give you some quality evaluation for quality analysis when we try to evaluate the wheat imported or the wheat flour made of, okay? Some of them I will not describe, but I will choose some I think it's more important or it's not as usual in another food products to do the quality analysis. That means this evaluation or this analysis is special for the flour or wheat, okay? First one is the 40 number. What's the 40 number? Here is the 40 number. Basically, we say that the 40 number is a kind of indicator. It's an indicator of wheat grain sprouting in the field. Basically, it's this indicated that if the wheat is sprout during the harvesting season, okay? So if the wheat grain is sprouted during the harvesting, that means there are some hydrolysis enzyme, for example, amylase or protease or some lipase will be biosynthesis by the wheat grain, okay? So in this case, we will use this machine, 40 number instrument, to determine how serious of the sprouting of the grain. If we have the serious degree of sprouting, that means the grain produced a lot of the amylase. If they have amylase inside of the grain, then when we cook the wheat flour, the amylase will hydrolyze the starch. So the pasting viscosity will significantly reduced. Okay, so you will see in this instrument, here is water base, the boiling water base. And there are two test tubes are inserted into the base. And behind of this base, there is a window, okay? This window will look at the spinner here. This is spinner, goes through the certain distance. If the paste is viscous, then they go through the certain distance. The time take to go through the certain distance will longer. If they are liquefied, okay, so they will go through quickly. So they will count the second, how quickly you will go through the window. So if here show the, for example, here show the 250 seconds, indicated that this wheat is sprouted in some certain degree. Basically, the sound wheat, we mean there is no sprouted. The time needed is about 350 50 or even 400, because there is less amount of amylase exist in the kernel. So the starch will not hydrolyze into smaller molecules size. And the viscosity during the pasting gelatinization, the viscosity is much higher. So this will be the very important when we purchase the wheat, or when we use we prepare the flour for the final products applications. Okay, so here just we said it's a volume number, and the higher number indicated the less degree of sprouting. Okay, and here is just why volume number is very important for the bakery products quality. As you can see here, this is the volume number is 62, 250, and 400. That means highly sprouting and strong or high amount of amylase exists in the flour. And so if you use this flour to making bread, the starch gel is not strong enough to hold the gas, and the bread structure is weak. So the volume of the bread will not big enough. Okay, but if your flour has less or even or don't have any amylase in the flour, you will see the volume of bread is not as good as some if you have some enzyme inside of the flour. Okay, so here is because you didn't produce, there is no enough enzyme amylase, for example amylase, so they cannot produce the glucose or maltose that's hydrolyzed from the starch for the yeast as the yeast carbon source. So during the fermentation, you cannot produce enough of gas from the yeast fermentation, so the volume cannot be as big as the flour with some amylase. In this case, you can use the volume number as another quality evaluation. That means you can add the amylase into the flour as the flour improver. Okay, so that's for the quality evaluation here. Another one, I just talk about the solvent retention capacity. This is called is SRC. Okay. When we made the product from the flour, we usually add the water or liquid to make the dough or to make the batter. Okay, but for example here, especially for the bread making, the optimum amount of water addition, or we said absorption by the flour, is very important. Because if you have an optimum amount of water added to make a fit flour dough, and after the kneading or during the fermentation, the gluten network will develop well, and then the structure or texture of the products will be much better. So the water absorption during flour mixing is very important. But how much water should be added depending on the composition in the flour? Okay, here just give you some idea. When we add water into the flour, the first purpose or the major purpose is hydrate water-insoluble protein. That means they will form the gluten later on, okay? And so the water we added during mixing, we try to hydrolyze the protein first. That's our main purpose. However, in flours, they may have some damaged starch made from the flour milling, especially for hard wheat. They have a hard texture, so you need to use the harsh conditions to grind them into the smaller particles. So they may make the starch granule damaged. And then some alluron layer, that's the outside area, outside layer of the endosperm. They contain a lot of pentosan, that's some kind of polysaccharide. Okay, they also absorb a lot of water. So if your flour has all of this composition, they will compete with gluten for the water absorption. So you need to adjust the water depending on the amount or the kind of the these components inside the flour. Here we will say the perfect granule, starch granule, okay, the intact starch granule, they will not take so much water, so you don't have to worry about too much, okay? They just have 0.3 to 0.45 times of water they will absorb by the weight. But the damaged starch, they will take 1.5 to 10 times of water absorption, depending how damaged they have. And the alluron layer, they will take about 10 times of water absorption. So you will see from here, just give you some idea. During flour mixing, okay, here is the temperature, okay? That means during preparation, dough mixing and the fermentation, and during the baking, early baking, this area, this time scale, okay? And here just show you the water absorption or water distribution in the flour dough. Here, about 40% of the water during the mixing or fermentation is absorbed by the intake of starch. That's because in flour, they have about 80% of the starch, okay? So by the weight percentage, they take about 40% of water during mixing and fermentation. And the protein for the flour may only have 10% or 12% protein. And they will take about 35% water absorption during mixing first. That's what I said. When you add water into the wheat flour to try to make a wheat flour dough, that's because we try to hydrate the structure or the conformation of water-insoluble protein and allow them to become the gluten. And the pentosan in the flour may only have 2 to 4% by weight, but they will take about 25% water during mixing. That's because pentosan will absorb 10 times of their weight of the water, okay? So, and after when they get into the oven, the water will redistribute because protein denature. They will lose their water, and the starch needed to be gelatinized. They will absorb the water, but the water absorbed by pentosan will not change, okay? So we needed to know how much amount or how many, what kind of composition or component will contribute with will contribute for the water absorption or competed with gluten for the water absorption. We need to know that. And so here, just try to give you some method they used for evaluate the flour water absorption or water distribution due to the different composition in flour, okay? This is the solvent retention capacity. Basically, this is the official measure, okay, in 2000, okay, and modified from the alkaline water retention capacity measure. This is very old measure used to evaluate the cookie flour, okay. And so here, just give you some idea. I will give you some idea, and we try to use this measure to provide individual and component and functional information in flour. Before that, I just to give you some idea, okay? The flour we used to make products, we can use, they have their characters, and we can divide it into 4 categories. Depending on the gluten strength, they may weak or strong. And depending on the final product's moisture content, they can have low or high. So if you give a combination, for example, the low moisture content products with the weak gluten, that's like cookie. And if high moisture content and weak gluten strength, that's cake. And for the crackers, since when we make a cracker, we need to make the noodles, make the dough sheet, and so we needed some gluten strength. So they needed the gluten strength strong, and but finally the cracker has low moisture content, and the bread has needed a perfect gluten network with high moisture content in the final products. So we just separate into these 4 categories. But this where the gluten strength is needed for the processing and the final product's texture, structure. And the moisture content is the product's specific types. So they may ask for different quality of flour to making the products. And this solvent retention capacity measure, basically they used 4 solvent. First one is the deionized water as the solvent. And this is a combination of the result, just as you made the flour with by adding the water. But somehow we needed to know what do they have, or how much do they have in the flour and affecting the absorption. So here they used 5% lactic acid to determine the water absorption effect by the glutenins. That's the protein, insoluble protein contributed the gluten, the elasticity of the properties. And then we use 5% sodium carbonate to evaluate how much damaged starch in the flour affecting the water absorption. Another one is 50% sucrose. This one was used to evaluate the arabinoxylan, that's the pentosan in the flour, okay? And as we all know, the gluten performance index, GPI, indicated the gluten properties of the flour when adding the water and mixing them. So the GPI can be defined by the SRC lactic acid value divided by the sum of sodium carbonate and sucrose. Okay, so this is the solution retention capacity measure used for the flour water absorption evaluation. Okay, and here just give you some idea. Okay, you don't have to remember or you memorize this number, but just give you some idea when they collect some flour from the market used for the cracker or cookie or waffle. Okay, all of these belong to the weak products, but with different gluten strengths. And so they have different water SRC value here, okay? And they try to get some idea, or you can make your own to have the something, we say that is a spider figure, okay? Just have 4 solvent in each axis. And you will see, okay, if you want this product, you want this flour made for the cookie, maybe you need to have all of these 4 different SRC value, okay? And if you want to make the bread, the SRC value distribution may be something like this, okay? So this is the quality evaluation for the flour company. They try to make the flour to tell consumer, okay, this flour is suitable for making bread or suitable for making cookie or something like that. Okay, and another is the rheological analysis. Okay, for the flour making, we always know the parameters or the content mentioned the moisture, age, protein in the pack or in front of pack is meaning nothing for the quality, okay? For the actually for the products making quality, it's not related at all. But somehow the rheological analysis is very important for the products of the flour making. Here is some video tab. I will leave here. If you are interested, you can go through, take a look, okay? But I just show you some idea and very important for the quality evaluation. First one is the farinograph. Farinograph is the instrument that just look like this. There is a mixer with the temperature consistent, okay? And inside of the this mixer has some stir, okay? And here just try to allow you to determine the water absorption of this flour. Another, because for the this measure, this is also an official measure to determine the water absorption and the water mixing properties. We try to add water to get this figure, has the maximum point or maximum tolerance to reach the 500 BU. BU is the unit of the Brobendo machine, okay? And from here, we can get the data. First is the water absorption, the optimal water absorption to get this figure. Another one is we will get the dough development time. That means how long should we mix to get the gluten developed. Some are quickly can reach this point, some are longer. So in this case, during the practice, okay, you can adjust the mixing time. And another indicator is you can see how quickly this curve just reduce the consistency. Okay, so you will know it's, this flour dough is mixing tolerance, how good of the mixing tolerance of this flour dough. So something information you can get from this Farino graph, okay? And here just give you some idea. For example, this is weak strength, gluten strength flour. They get the reached quickly, but break down quickly also. And this is medium one, and this is strong. And in another one is extensor graph. Extensor graph is the instrument look like this, and you can have the dough sheet in put in the holder here, and you can have a hook above the dough, and then when you start to measurements, you just have this hook just going down, and you will pour the dough far away until they break down. So you will have the measurements traced like this way, okay? Here just tell you how long they can go through. And this here, the maximum at 5 centimeters or 5 minutes, or the maximum before they break down, like you can record the force they needed or torque you needed. That means how strong of the flour dough, and this means how extensibility of the flour dough. Okay, so from this the data, you will know the gluten or mixing properties, viscoelasticity of the flour dough. So this figure can give you some idea, okay? If you have the flour during the mixing, they show you the extensor graph like this. You will know during the fermentation on the bench, they will just, the dough will look like this way. And if you make the bread, pan bread, they will have a good volume and symmetrical appearance, okay? But if you have the strong dough, strong gluten dough, your bread will not fermented or have the not good enough volume. And if you have very weak gluten, you will see during the fermentation, they will just spread. And then after the baking in the pan, you will not accept these products at all. Okay, so here just give you some idea of the extensor graph indicated the viscosity and the elasticity of the dough. Basically, the flour dough is the combination of viscosity and elasticity. And depending on the products you are making, you may not need every products you made of this flour. They may not be suitable for everything. I am not sure if you have any idea, is this flour is so bad, cannot be used? Can you think about any products can made from this flour? Or made from this flour? Actually, I will tell you, like you have a concept about any flour can make something if you find the right properties for them, okay? So it's for sure, if you made the pan bread like toast, maybe this flour with this extensibility and viscosity is good. But if you are made pan bread, like we say the flat bread, okay, like bread, like Indian bread, okay, flat one, you may need this flour, because you don't need to have a too high of the volume, but you need that can spread easily. And I don't know if, do you have a chance to eat Chinese deep fried product? We call it 油条. Have you seen that they made on the street? Have you seen it? How do they make it? 油条, 豆浆店. For the breakfast, traditional Chinese breakfast restaurant of the shop, okay, they will make 油条. When they make the dough, they only this length, okay. But before they deep frying, they are very easily to till, okay. Like maybe 3 times or 4 times of length of the original. Why they can make this so easily? Because the flour dough has very weak strength, but they still have the very good extensibility. Okay? So this is in the case, just let you know, not everything made from this flour. Okay? And is anyone can think about how can you use this flour to make some kind of products? If you are making the baguette, the French bread, okay, basically there are no pan or no mold to hold the dough. They have the self-raising dough. So they need the bread. They can have. They need the dough during fermentation. They just not so much spread, but just have increase the height. Okay, so for this flour may be good for the no pan bread. Okay, no mold, no pan bread. Okay, so this just give you some idea how come we need to evaluate the flour properties during the dough properties here. Another one is aminograph. Aminograph actually is the same idea as the foreign number, okay? But in this case, we just try to know how much amylase should be added in as the bread flour improver. If you still remember the foreign number, I show you the 64, 25, 250, 400 second foreign number. They have a different shape and different volume of the bread. So sometimes when we purchase or imported wheat, we like to have sound wheat flour or sound wheat with the high foreign numbers. But in that case, it may not good to make the bread. So we need to add extra amylase into the flour when we make bread. So how much should we add in? We need the aminograph to determine how high of the peak viscosity or how many percentage reduced of peak viscosity due to the amylase added. Okay. All right, here just give you some idea. If I have added the low enzyme activity, then I have a low volume. If I have an optimum enzyme activity, then I have a good volume and the shape of the bread. If I have a high enzyme activity, then it may not be good shape as the optimum one, okay? So here is the aminogram, can give you some idea. If enzyme activity is more, the peak viscosity decrease, but you need to decide what's the, how much reduction of the peak viscosity related to the amount of amylase added, okay? So wheat flour quality actually is very important, and it's depending on the wheat, the coming wheat, okay, and the wheat flour used for making products. So who needed the wheat flour quality? Basically, the producer of the flour, wheat imported, that means the flour miller, okay? They needed to produce the high quality and all consistent quality and the high yield of the flour. And for the wheat flour miller or processor, they also needed to know what kind of the quality are suitable for the specific products making. Then they can sell to the specific consumer. Okay, so they need to evaluate the flour quality. For example, the protein content, flour yield, baking performance, or even for pasta quality. For the consumer, they ask the flour, the bakery products or products made is tasty and nutritious and safety. Okay, so all these are different criteria for each person. They may need they have their own quality requirement. Okay, and but most of the time, as we divided the wheat products into the wheat gluten and the strong gluten products. So the gluten strength is very important. Okay, if you want to make a cake, you don't want to have a strong gluten, okay, flour. So gluten is very important first. And for the absorption, water absorption to make a flour or make a batter, damaged starch is also important. Okay, so here just have a gluten strength, damaged starch is very important. The first for the flour quality to evaluate it, and it's depending on what kind of products you want to make from, okay, make it from wheat flour. But here just give you some idea for wheat flour milling. Okay, this is from the miller's point of view. What do they ask for the quality? First, we said it's 3 S. First is safety. Second is sustainable. Then is standard. Okay, the safety is I always tell students, for the food making or food related issues, safety is always the first thing you need to be concerned. It needed to be concerned. If it's not a safety, you don't use it at all. So safety is very important. Okay. Then sustainability. For the miller, for them, they need to have build a good relationship with the consumer, okay, the flour user. So they need to have full attention for the complaint from the end use, the user, okay, food processor or some noodle making processor or something like that. And they ask for the consistent final products. So the flour need to have a consistent quality for them. Otherwise, they need to adjust every time. I don't think the processor or the flour user have the patience to do that. Okay. Third is standard. Okay. Standard is you need to meet the government regulation. For example, for the wheat flour, the maximum water content or moisture content should not above 14%. Okay. And for strong gluten flour, the protein content should be above 12.5 or something like that. Okay, so this is the government regulation or the standard for the products. Then the consumer and the producer standard, they have their own, because when I made my products, it's special for the bread, and I needed the flour quality can make a good bread. Okay, so you need to have this standard from the consumer or quality spec from the consumer. Okay, so basically the wheat application is used for wheat flour, and the wheat flour company or manufacturer usually is local industry, because wheat can be kept longer, but the wheat flour, since after broken the grain, so they cannot keep it too long. And each country, each local, they have their own culture or their application of the flour. So they have their own spec from the flour. So the flour miller needed to meet the requirement or demand from the end user. So that's very important. Okay, rest part of the this material. Okay, I just give you some idea only, because I will not talk too much about the microbial or mycotoxin, but let's become more important issue right now. Because when we ask people or consume the whole grain, you will know the whole grain, including the bran, and everything should come make it into the flour or should be consumed intact. So the bran is the outer layer of the grain contact with the soil, air, or some manufacturing facilities. So if you have any mistake, they will make the whole system or transportation train or something just very dangerous. So it's very important here also. But here, just give you some idea the contamination source of cereal and the cereal-based products. There are many sources add something into your flour. Okay, most of them, if you add in these parts, it's not good at all. Okay, and the storage condition and the storage temperature is very important for the grain, because grain, if intact grain, if you have a moisture content keep low, then they can keep longer. Okay, so storage condition is very important. Here, just give you some concept about the responsible damage of grain during storage. Basically, if it's a sound grain, okay, if they have it's completely intact of grain, we said they are safe, okay, because they just like, especially you keep them dry, okay. So they will not germinate, they will not do some kind of biochemical pathway, okay, during the sun-dried kernel. But if your storage temperature or moisture, especially moisture, is high, then they will get into the respiration and they will have some germination, or even so at higher temperature, the insect will just survive because they will incubated and they will eat the grain as their nutrients. Okay, so they will grow and your grain will be damaged. Okay, and if you the storage condition is high, moisture content is high, and the temperature is high, fungi will grow. Okay, this fungi may be from the spore or just bacteria or some of the fungi spore. If you keep them dry and low temperature, it may be okay because you will clean them before the meeting. But if they have moisture to grow, and if they grow enough population, some fungi will have a second metabolite. It's mycotoxin. That's very dangerous. Okay, so all of this will change during the storage. So it's very important during the storage. Actually, the supply chain is the mycotoxin occurrences are usually during the supply chain. They will occur during the harvest climate conditions. If when you harvest, the climate is warm and moist, and the fungi or fungi spore from the soil or even from the air, from the water, they will grow on the spike of the grain. And the climate condition during harvesting and the moisture content at harvesting, all of this will damage the grain. Storage is very important. Okay, condition during the storage structure. This is the hardware, damage kernel percentage, and drying conditions, storage temperature. All of this will have a chance to cause the mycotoxin occurrence, okay? And so basically, there are some mycotoxin occurred in the cereal and the grain. And here is the rest of the material. I think you can read by yourself because I just give you some idea. I separate into the spoilage of cereal, and here is some occurrence of the cereal. Basically, we will see, okay, it's really happened and in practice, okay. So, the blue one is the they surveyed, and the orange column is indicated above the safety level of the mycotoxin, okay. And here is some microorganisms that produce the mycotoxin, especially for cereal grains, okay. And here is the defect of the cereals, okay. And here is give you some idea if you are interested in this, okay. They will give you some mycotoxin and produced from the organism, and here is the effect of ingestion of human, what will cause the illness or even the death, okay. And here is some mycotoxin fungi, okay. You can tell from the field. Basically, if your field has some of this, we will not collect or we will not harvest this field, the grain from this field, okay? And here is some pictures show you if infected by the this microorganism, and this is DOM, the toxin. This also, you will see the grain is shrinkage. Basically, if you have a small amount of this, it's easy to clean out during the separation or the shifting or disc separation. Okay, but you still need to be aware. Okay, and here is some method to reducing microorganism on the grain. Okay, so rest of them just similar like this. I think here, just leave here because my time is out. So I think you can just, if you are interested, you just need to know it. And for the whole grain products, this is very important because we just eat whole thing, especially the brand outside or brand together. Okay, so we need to realize this, and it's fortunately worldwide they set more restrict regulation for the maximum allowance of each mycotoxin. Okay, so it's very, I think it's more and more attention are paid for this issue right now. Okay, all right. I think rest of them, I think it's easier for you to read through, and some of the novel prevention or preservation technique have mentioned earlier lectures. Okay, so you can take a look. But some of them are still testing, because you will see the flour milling, we treat the wheat is maybe 100 tons or 1,000 tons each time. It's not easy to scale up just by use the low temperature pulse treatment or something, because we not just treatment about 1 kilogram wheat. We need to treat about 1,000 tons of the wheat before the storage or before the milling. Okay, so it's still, it's difficult to scale up right now about some novel treatment technique. Okay, okay. So any question? If you have a question, or if you have a question like to discuss about the rest of the material, you can write an email to me. Okay, so I think I just ended the class for today, and thank you very much.